All right, guys.
Hey.
I'm with Justin down there and with John Lordan.
Hello, hello.
Everyone should know who John Lordan is. He's Brain Scratch and Lordan Arts. But if you have anything else you want to let us know about yourself, John, go ahead.
Sure. I've been kind of doing true crime, but on the YouTube front for about 5 years at this point. Brain Scratch is my main show about unsolved mysteries. It led to a spin-off called Searchlight, which focuses on missing persons cases. And then everything was kind of getting heavy on the channel. And I thought, we need to see the brighter side of some of these cases. So we made another show called Case Cracked, which is about how cases get solved. Over the past few years, I've started 2 different podcasts. I do a podcast with Danielle Hallen called Crime After Crime, where the 2 of us pick a topic like most bizarre weapon, and we each do our own research and write up stories, and then we go head to head and let the audience vote on which one they like more. Danielle did win season 1. No, I'm not bitter. And over the past 2 years, we've been working on a show called 3 Men and a Mystery. That's with myself, Mike Morford, and Gray Hughes. And we've done 2 seasons of that. That's more of a deep dive investigative podcast where we focus on one case per season. And we're going to talk a little bit later tonight about the case that we covered in season 2.
Justin, you had a question for John to start off?
Oh, you had spoken about a fellow true crime YouTuber who has recently shut down her channel due to online harassment for accusations levied against her. Do you want to talk about that real quick?
Yeah. Shauna Ray is a YouTuber in the same space as myself and Danielle Hallen and Kendall Ray. There's a lot of young women that are coming into this space, and they're doing very well with their formats on YouTube. They work very hard in terms of research and pulling these stories together. I have no doubt that Shauna Ray is a person like that because I'm actually a subscriber of hers. I do kind of keep an eye on my fellow true crimers just so I'm not, repeating the same stories as them and all that kind of good stuff. But so there were some accusations from someone on Reddit who is claiming that a write-up of theirs about a particular case was basically copied by Shauna Ray. And, trying to get the Reddit community mobilized or angry about something is probably not the most difficult thing in the world.
No, not at all.
Yeah, I don't know if you guys have any experience with that, but so essentially there was a lot of attacks that started coming towards her. People that were sending her messages, putting posts on her videos, contacting her through her personal email, a lot of really bad stuff. And it rattled her pretty bad. Currently, all of her videos are delisted except for one video explaining this whole ordeal. And I thought she handled it really well. She took her script for that particular story, ran it through 2 different checkers that look specifically for plagiarism. Yeah. And they came back with very low percentages, like 2% hits. And then she even went instance by instance to say, okay, this is saying that I'm copying the term, please subscribe and like, which is all over the place on YouTube.
And she actually had a conversation with the original accuser.
Yeah.
And they worked it out and they pulled their accusation saying, okay, we referenced all the same sources. So it was just very similar. But the angry mobs, they don't ever get the memo on that. And when you talk about online angry mobs, each individual wants their own personal pound of flesh for their justice. And it's just a real sick entitlement that I personally have seen multiple times online. And it really saddens me too that it's part of the true crime community that really takes part in these, because you would think that we're all trying to do our best to raise awareness for sensitive topics and whatnot. So why try to tear somebody down? Also, being a true crime community fan, you would think that their investigation skills would be a little bit better, but instead they just take any accusation hurled out there and they just run with it and go after people. And the vitriol and hypocrisy is astounding. But I've been gone after because I refuse to tear down others. Just simply not going after somebody else, I'm torn. And I don't know. At this point, I think that if somebody's accused of something like that online, I don't even see the point of even addressing it or even apologizing for it, because it just gives the angry mobs more ammo against you to tear apart your explanation.
That's something that grabs me. And I don't know if I've got this kind of like complex where I want to be the answer for everybody, but I don't know Shauna Ray directly very well. We kind of follow each other on Twitter, I think, and that's about it. We started Crime After Crime with Danielle Hallen because Danielle and I met at CrimeCon. And, you know, we were even talking before that about just kind of like, how do you deal with the pressures of this? What do you do when a family is upset about your coverage and they blow up at you? Or like, we started this kind of little group support, you know, not quite a full blown like therapy session, but just, hey, if you need to talk to someone, you know, I'm here and I've got some experience on this because I'm a couple of years down the road, a little further than you guys in terms of how long I've been doing this.
Yeah.
I feel like there's like a missed opportunity with Shauna Ray because I never had that connectivity with her. I didn't run into her at CrimeCon and be able to kind of make that connection, because I certainly would be telling her very much the same points that you are. You're never going to keep everyone happy. There is a way to deal with negative attention like that, and it's probably not by trying to address it head on. There's this really strange thing that happens when people get a belief and they want to stand on that belief. You're never going to convince them otherwise. You can spend, and I used to do this on my channel. I would literally try, like when I first got into this.
Aaron has done it a lot too. He tries to reason with some of these people, and I'm like, just stop, man.
It's such a time sink, because you honestly get like, out of the 10 times that I would try it, maybe in 2 of those conversations, we would actually get to a point where the conversation would really get interesting and people would say, okay, I kind of see your point, but what about this and what about that? The other 8 times, complete waste of time. Yeah. It's like you're just playing ping pong against the wall. I mean, it's just, there's nothing getting through. And ultimately, it's tough. I think her name is Faiza, is saying it's jealous. I think there is an aspect to some level of jealousy. I think people are looking at creators like the 3 of us and saying, hey, these guys are making a career out of this. And, you know, that was kind of the tone of some of the accusations with her, that, you know, you're rolling in dough off of other people's tragedy, essentially.
I have to give Aaron a lot of credit though, because he's like the hater whisperer, and people write in nasty things and he somehow turns them. I would say he probably turns
everybody. Let's just be honest.
he probably gets 8 out of the 10 to turn, and then the 2 that he gives up on.
Then I pick up the 2. That's crazy. I'm going to hire you for working on my channel then. It's interesting with YouTube in particular, because like for most of your guys' work, I know you're on podcasts. So anyone that's trying to get to you, they're going to come in through kind of other channels. You know, they're going to reach out maybe on Twitter and blast at you, or do their own posts at Reddit and blast at you. For YouTube, we've got that comment box right there. And it is like keeping a catalog of the whole conversation. Yeah. I think it's a good thing for true crime in particular, because thoughts and theories of the audience are all kept in that one place, which I think is great, particularly for family members that are coming and want to understand their cases better. But on the flip side, for a flare session, your piece of art has basically just been tagged by all this negativity as well.
But John, on the other hand, the other thing is sometimes we can't think of everything when we're covering a case, and we just covered April Renee Tucker. And on there, Justin and I had a little conversation toward the end about where did all the blood go? And Justin gave his theory that it might have been internal bleeding. And I said, maybe the dogs lapped it up. But someone else made, they sent us an email, and it was really brilliant, because they said, well, if the doctors are saying that they're not responsible for the scalpel cuts when we know one of them was, then why couldn't they have lied about where the blood went at the operating room? Yeah. So we don't even really know the whole story. We just know that there will always be a question. But if you're doing a show live, people can add in questions, and then you can react to them. You can say, now that's a good point. Yeah. And then react and give your opinion on it.
As opposed to somebody questioning you from a video you made from a year earlier. You know?
Yeah. That's what podcasting's like.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I still do, I still watch comments like that when I can. I mean, it gets really tough when I've got over 1,000 videos on my channel at this point, and every now and then I'll get someone that wants to talk about a case that I covered like 4 years ago, and it's like my brain just isn't able to pull all that detail back instantly like that. So it does get a little tough at times. But to your point, the audience is such an important component to the conversation, and I've always been very clear from day one. I know Ms. Lee is here, and she's saying she was following me since the Elisa Lam case.
Yeah.
I've always been clear that I'm just putting out kind of where I am at the time that I've made that video in terms of my thoughts and theories. Mm-hmm. And the audience, including dialogue, gives me other directions to go in. And that's why the Elisa Lam series in particular, you know, went on for, I think it's probably close to 20 videos at this point, because there's so many other considerations about what about this angle? What about this direction? And that's because of the audience. I think we should play to our strengths, being different than television or a documentary. And one of those big strengths is that it is a two-way conversation. We don't have a big $20 million budget that I need so I could do part 2 of a documentary. I can kick on the camera and do another piece, you know, the following week.
Well, and all these people, they know that we're just individuals, so they can get at us. Whereas I'm sure they don't write a angry email to HBO about every single show on there when they're dissatisfied.
You might be surprised.
Well, this is true.
Yeah, don't put it past them.
But real quick, if anyone on this chat knows Shauna, or anyone, if Shauna's listening or watching, your channel was awesome. And I would actually pull my podcast out of retirement and interview you, Shauna, about what had happened to you. So, yeah.
I really hope that she will get clear of this. I really hope those videos get turned back on. I hope all those families that need that exposure get the benefit of those videos coming back. And hopefully there's some growing and learning opportunities in this. And it's not about hardening yourself. It's not about trying to toughen up and be able to take these shots. We're all human. We all feel when we're put through things like that. But maybe it's about connecting like with the community. You know, I mean, now I've known you guys kind of for a couple of years, specifically because of CrimeCon.
Yeah.
So, and it was such a big deal to connect with other people and say, wow, I'm not just this one guy in these 4 walls. Like there's other people doing this too. And when I talk to them about what this is like, they know, like, you guys get it, you know?
And as far as toughening up or getting a thicker skin, I mean, an accusation of plagiarism and she's getting death threats, really doxed, you know, all kinds of just hate. Like, come on. It's like, she didn't kill anybody.
Right. Well, and you know, there's another aspect to this too. And that's, where does the original thing come from about, I did this write up on this story. This is now my story. Because honestly, I don't think that that's really true. I feel like the stories that I cover on my channel, they're not my story. They belong to those families. They belong to the friends. They belong to the people that are hurting in those situations. The only thing I'm trying to do is to raise exposure, bring some light, show them that people care, bring a big community of other people that care to them, help their efforts, donate to their GoFundMes, make donations in the honor of their missing loved ones. There's a lot of ways that we bring light to those families, but to run around and say, you know, that's my story and other people are taking my story and running with it, that's just not true. The story doesn't belong to you.
And we're not trying to make it funny. We're not trying to make it entertainment. We're just trying to deliver a message.
Yeah.
No knock against comedy channels or podcasters. Just, we're not making it about ourselves. So.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a really important distinction with these cases.
Yeah.
John, so you had on your other podcast, 3 Men and a Mystery, had covered a case, which I've read up on a bit, and I know there's also a petition, which I may have to share out. Can you tell us a bit about this case where it's a mystery? Was it suicide? Was it murder? But of course, when you dig into it, the facts become clear, correct? Can you talk a bit about this case?
Yeah, absolutely. This is the case of Elisa Gomez. And I actually reached out to her mother and her sister earlier this evening and told them that we would be doing this. And I do believe that her sister is very likely watching. Her mother might be watching as well. Elisa was an artist. She was working on her final college project at the Minneapolis College of Art and Design. It was a self-portrait that she was painting. And in the portrait, she has duct tape covering her mouth, and the word silenced is written on the tape. Really dramatic image. As a matter of fact, we used it kind of as the show art for the whole second season of Three Men and a Mystery. But this goes down in 2016. This is in October. First responders show up on a bright sunny fall morning to a cute cottage home with a wooden picket fence. But as they get closer, they see that the gate for the fence has been shattered to pieces. The wood frame along the top of the gate is broken in two. They head up the walkway, and an outdoor lighting fixture is laying on the ground. A cell phone would later be found in the bushes 2 houses down. There was clearly some sort of dispute outside. However, several of these details would not wind up in the responding officers' reports. And this is another interesting aspect of this case is her mother worked so hard, and her sister, and collected all this information. And they literally handed me not just like a case file, I mean like a box. And we have audio, we have videos from the first responders. So we're really looking at this through a much closer lens than a lot of the coverage I usually do, where I'm kind of looking through the lens of media and then maybe a couple police reports. In this one, we're like smack in the middle of the file as we're learning about this. So the night before the cops show up, there was a disturbance call that was phoned in by the neighbors. They said they heard a man and a woman yelling at each other outside. The neighbors were familiar with Elisa, and they kind of thought that it sounded like her. They didn't know the man too well, but they call police. Unfortunately, the police don't show up until I think 30 or 35 minutes after the phone call. And once they do show up, they don't stop. They literally just kind of slow down. They see there's no disturbance outside, and they continue on. They just drive off.
John, that seems really alarming because let's just talk about domestic violence for a moment.
Yeah.
It's really the officers that can step in and help. Or if, say, the husband kills the wife, or the boyfriend kills the girlfriend, or the girlfriend kills the boyfriend, etc., they can come in and they can start the investigation right away, rather than this assumption that, well, things are quiet now. Well, they could be quiet because someone's dead.
Yeah, and it's really strange because I've been in situations where I've heard domestic disputes going on and I've called the police, and then I've watched what happened. In kind of similar situation, middle of the night, you hear some neighbors yelling. And in the cases where I've done that, the officers will actually stop. They'll usually at least do a knock on the door there, but then they'll also come and talk to the person that reported it.
Mm-hmm.
And in this instance, it seems like none of that happened. I think, and, keep in mind, we're talking about Minneapolis. We're talking about, a pretty large area, a ton of people that live there. I don't know what the load is like for officers on a typical night in that area, but to not at least knock on the door, to not talk to the people that originally made the phone call, it seems like there's a lot of really big missed opportunities that night. And admittedly, they didn't know, but the next morning, literally within 6 or 7 hours of when that phone call happened, they're going to be called again. And this time they're being told that someone is dead and they have to show up and investigate it.
Whoops.
That's just unbelievable to me, because I think this is something that could have been prevented possibly. And so if they would talk to the person who called in, they could gauge their alarm. Like, how alarming was it to hear what you heard, and then go from there. But again, maybe they just feel like it's not worth their time.
I can tell you guys that there was a pretty young girl that was one of the people that overheard this. And I heard a recent tape and an interview with her that happened just in the past few months. And when she talks about it, she still gets, like, her voice is cracking and she's super nervous to even kind of go back to the memory of just hearing this fight that was happening right outside of the wall of her bedroom at the family house.
So there's a huge fight,
Yeah.
an altercation, and then the cops are called back, and now there's a dead body.
Yeah. So
And how do they address that?
Well, there's some issues we got here. So essentially they're called to the house, they show up, they see the broken stuff. They're led in by a roommate of Elisa's called Sharon. Elisa's boyfriend, also husband, we'll get into more of those details in a moment, is there as well. He's at the front steps. He's one of the officers says he seems very upset. He thinks that he's crying. I've seen the body cam footage, and I don't know that I would say he's crying. He certainly seems nervous from what I can see, but he's kind of crouched down at the front door. So the first responders go down this pretty narrow staircase that leads to the basement. Elisa had actually had her bedroom in the basement, and a bathroom door is on the right. And as you look straight from that bathroom door, there is a beam, like a big, 6-inch beam that is overhead. And there is a scarf that is tied to the beam, and the scarf is just hanging down. Underneath the scarf is Elisa's body, laying face down. She was 47 years old. She was wearing a sweater over a shirt, but she only had on her panties, which is still kind of strange. It's still an aspect of this case that I don't quite understand. Her body's draped over a short step stool that's usually used for dogs. She is just an animal lover. She loves animals, has her whole life. One of her businesses is taking care of dogs in particular. So there are actually dogs that she's taking care of that are at the house while this is going down. The dogs are literally around her body. And the first responder comes down, and he can't get to her because there's one dog that he's intimidated by in particular. I mean, I think it might have been a pit, or it's a dog that looks a lot like that. Very big, muscular dog standing there just staring at them. So he's nervous. He basically tells all the first responders, hey, back up. And he's getting everyone kind of backed up. One of I think it's a fire marshal, comes down, sees the situation, and then starts talking to the dogs, goes over, and this big dog all of a sudden just comes right up and, just as sweet as can be. And the fire marshal kind of pets the dog, and they get him by. And he tries to evaluate Elisa. And as soon as he looks at her, he knows that there's no hope. This is not any type of rescue effort. She's gone. So the story that is being told from Sharon is that the boyfriend, husband, comes and wakes up Sharon and says, you got to come downstairs. Sharon has 2 children, very young girls living there as well. Sharon goes downstairs. She says that she sees Elisa hanging. She's so upset that she's kind of cursing at Elisa while she grabs a pair of fingernail clippers and uses them to cut Elisa down. Now, I can tell you guys, I've looked at pictures of Elisa on the actual medical examiner's table, and if Sharon would have seen her face, I know that there's no reason that she would have cut Elisa down. There was no chance that she was still alive at this point. But according to Sharon's story, she just saw Elisa's back. She didn't really see her face.
And I mean, I would just say that if somebody you love and care about's hanging, you might just want to get them down, regardless of whether or not you think you're going to rescue them. It's dignity.
Yeah, I definitely get that aspect. The question about how close they are is a little tough. It seems like Sharon was kind of a friend of a friend type thing. Knew Elisa through the circle of that friend connection for maybe a couple years. Had only recently moved in to the house and lived there with Elisa. But to your point, yeah, absolutely. We don't know how any of us are going to respond. I can tell you personally, and maybe this is just because of the experience that I have in terms of the work that we do, but if there's a body and
don't touch it.
Yeah.
Get away.
Don't touch it. I mean, get the investigators there right away so they can analyze. And with a case like this, you've now got a major problem, because if there is some type of foul play situation, the body's already been touched. It's been removed from where it was. No real good analysis can be done in terms of the ligature, what's going on with the section that was actually tied around her neck. Even where her body has landed, there's a lot of questions that are raised because we didn't have pictures taken of the scene, with her still in the position. Everything is after the fact of her being moved, which is a huge problem in this and really trying to understand all this. So the most interesting thing about all this is Elisa was married to her boyfriend for only about 12 hours at the time that this happened. So there's a little bit of a backstory that she starts dating this guy. She gets a car and she decides that she's going to kind of do an informal rideshare thing. She's posting on Craigslist. She's putting it on Facebook. Hey, if you need a ride, yeah, there he is. Brad Alexander. She's putting out, you know, if you need a ride, I'll give you a ride around the city. And he responds to one of those things. They seem to hit it off, and he basically moves in. Like, I mean, this relationship moves extremely fast. I think within a week or two of them meeting, he moves in. They have a very volatile relationship kind of right from the start. It's extremely passionate. They are either completely in love or they completely are at odds, and it oscillates like every 2 weeks. They communicated a lot through text, and part of the records that we've been able to get is the text exchanges between them. They would fight fiercely in these text messages. We've got other conditions going on with this because they talked about possibly getting married. They'd only been together, I think, 6 or 7 weeks. And they were supposed to go to the courthouse to get their license to get married. And the wedding was planned for April. Yeah. Elisa's family and friends are already like, you know, who is this guy? And you're talking about getting married to him. And they barely know the guy. They haven't been together that long. They go to the courthouse and all of a sudden they wind up getting married that day. So there's a big question in terms of why did the wedding get bumped up like this? The story Brad tells is because they found out that the marriage license would only be good for 6 months and it wasn't going to cover getting them to the April date. So they decided to just go ahead and get married. In the context of what was going on with their relationship, I can tell you, I think Elisa was trying to rescue him a bit.
Just like she would dogs.
Yeah, exactly. And he was struggling. This is a guy that has it really bad with alcohol. I mean, just really, really bad. Also some drug use that I saw in the text message exchanges as well.
Well, and if they fought that passionately, they had a lot of passion for each other, which might explain the rush to get married. Because
yeah,
I mean, I'm not trying to defend the guy at all. I'm just saying that when you have that deep of feelings for somebody, it can, you know, take you away.
But yeah, John, isn't it true that he really was pushing to move the date up?
It seems like it. According to some other information that we found throughout our investigation, it's hard because as good as the text exchanges are for understanding what was going on in the relationship, the details around that particular day aren't that great. The weekend before, he was basically gone. He was on a bender again. And her thing was always about trying to bring him home. She really felt like if he was there with her, if they were at home, that he couldn't get in too much trouble. She can kind of like keep an eye on him and help him. Like she really thought she was helping him even through the addiction stuff. Like she would hide alcohol for him, you know, like, hey, I've got your bottle. I'm going to put it away. And then, you know, later you can go ahead and have some or something like that. And then when they'd be fighting, like one of the things he would constantly throw out is, where's my bottle? And and you took my vodka, or you took my tequila. Like it was such an important focus to him. So yeah, it was just a crazy, like a roller coaster. I got to tell you guys, reading through the text messages is just, it's tough. It's tough to get through because you keep seeing these windows of, wow, it looks like she's figuring this out. It looks like she's going to get out of this. Yeah. And ultimately, you know that she doesn't. So somehow they rush the wedding. They go out that night and celebrate at a local bar. They're there with Sharon. So the three of them all go to this local bar. We have footage from the bar. And you can tell in the footage that something happens at the bar that upsets Elisa. We've got a nice close-up of her as she's leaving. She leaves on her own. And then Brad and Sharon actually leave after her. So that in itself is already kind of weird. But you can see when she's hitting the door, she's upset. An interesting thing is when you listen to the detective interviews, you never really get a good sense about what the fight was about. There's a few different stories that kind of float around, but there's not a solid understanding of whatever the fight is that started at Cedar Inn. So,
well, when it comes to somebody with that raging of an addiction problem, somebody that's an alcoholic, it could be over anything. I mean, really.
Well, and you're feeding that monster at this point, right? I mean, they're literally at a bar, they're celebrating. So it's all under the guise of, hey, now it's fine for us to cut loose and have a drink. Mm-hmm. And I think this is on it's either a Monday night or a Tuesday, if I remember right.
Mm-hmm. And the only reason why I bring up the alcoholism is because he has multiple DUIs. He has a whole criminal record, mainly based around decisions he made when he was drunk.
Yeah, absolutely. And now that we're touching on his record, one of the things that really is a tough social aspect of this case, like when you're looking into the people and the makeup of the people that are involved here, is he actually has charges specifically for choking one of his previous wives. And he actually served time for it. As we started doing our work on 3 Men and a Mystery, we were getting contacted by all kinds of different people that had different parts of this puzzle, and all of the pieces were fitting the same message. It was that this guy has a history of violence, has been known to choke other women in particular.
Is out of control completely. Yeah.
One of them was kind of a precursor to a sexual assault as well. And that's kind of what I'm wondering in particular with her body being found with her pants off. It just seems really strange that you're telling me at, midnight when they're out at this bar and they get in this big fight and she leaves. We've got this timeline of them being in that fight, somehow that fight moving out to the neighbor's lawn at around the 2:30 a.m. range. The story being told by Brad and Sharon after that has this big black hole about whatever happens after the fight outside. No one really explains how it de-escalates. No one explains. It's just, oh, well, we came back inside and Elisa went downstairs and, Brad fell asleep on the couch and kind of that's it.
And they say it's suicide.
Well, this is where it gets interesting because you have the police, they bring out a couple of homicide investigators and they conduct 2 interviews. They get, 3 actually. They get Brad, they get Sharon, and then Sharon's sister who actually came and picked up the kids. And they're just kind of confirming something small with her, which was when you came to get Sharon's kids, were the police there? And for some reason, her sister keeps insisting the police weren't there yet, which is another interesting question because we have the call log from the police department and we can see that they arrived 5 minutes after the 911 call. So it's not really feasible that her sister kind of snuck in between when 911 was called and the police showing up 5 minutes later to pick up the kids. It's too tight of a time frame. So it's interesting because I do think that the homicide investigators were kind of picking up on pieces that seemed a little strange about it, but ultimately they can't quite close up the package. They check the scarf, they run DNA tests on the scarf. They can't find Brad's DNA or Sharon's DNA on the scarf, which is a bit of a problem because we know Sharon actually handled the scarf. I mean, she supposedly cut Elisa down. So why isn't her DNA on the scarf? The other problem is the scarf was supposedly cut, but we have photographs of the scarf. There's no piece of it missing. What was that?
I'm sorry, but there's discrepancies in their story. There's discrepancies in the time frame. And this guy has a history of violence, but hey, she's on the ground. She has a scarf around her neck. That's it.
That's kind of how it winds up. I mean, ultimately they put a little package together. I do think that they presented it to the district attorney's office. The district attorney's office just said, there's not enough here. And they had a really big discrepancy because you've got the medical examiner that actually rules the manner of death as could not be determined. And he leaves the door open, basically saying that, the possibility of homicide, he can't rule that out.
Yeah.
But the police department looks at it as, this looks like a suicide, closed case. There's nothing we can really do on it. And let's just let it go.
Well, and then the other thing that I've seen talked about is she loved dogs. So she left these dogs without any kind of arrangement for them to be taken care of. And, I get that point of view. At the same time, if you are suicidal, you don't really think logically and try to, accommodate for everybody in your life. But at the same time, that one dog was very defensive of her. And I'm wondering, did that dog just witness her being attacked and now
Right.
is guarding her body?
Yeah, there was a lot of, and I mean, this doesn't necessarily rule out suicide either, but there was a lot of plans that she had going on. I mean, she's literally wrapping up this degree that she's been working on. She's been in a rent to own situation in the house. The house is about to become hers. She's running this business that's kind of almost too successful for her at a point with the dog watching stuff. She's also working as an art teacher at a Korean immersion school. I don't know when this woman slept. I mean, she was doing so much. She has 2 adult children. One of them was supposed to come by the next morning. They were going to go have breakfast together. Her daughter, Jade, who actually went to the courthouse and was a witness for the wedding that happened. It's interesting because one of the things with 3 Men and a Mystery, when we were doing it, I really wanted to try to pull in as many different experts as we can to kind of route out all these different little pieces and say, can we look at this? And can we look at this? Is there some way to make a firm determination on all this? Dr. Shiloh and Dr. Scott from LA Not So Confidential came on. We had them review the email exchanges. They're forensic psychologists.
Yeah.
We had them review all the email exchanges, and basically their conclusions were this is not someone that looked suicidal in terms of Elisa. Dr. Scott works particularly for identifying people that could be offenders or repeat offenders. And I asked him, knowing what you know about Brad, we had him listen to the interview and look into his criminal history. I'm like, is this a guy that would be a file on your desk at your day job? And he was like, yes, absolutely. So it's tough because you bring in all these experts, you get all these little pieces, and we kind of tried to summarize it at the end of the season, almost like a scoreboard. Like, okay, we had, criminal behavior. Sarah Kalin came in. She kind of went this way. We had Dr. Laura Petler come on, and she was saying it looks like there's something very odd that's going on. This is certainly a case that she would be looking at in terms of it possibly being a staged homicide. We had the forensic psychologist pointing in the direction of this looks very odd. This doesn't look like this is a suicide situation. All of those little indicators are pushing me in particular to the direction that there's more to this story than a simple, she gave up. And the thing that's really tough is her family. If you would even try to run that by them, maybe she just gave up. They have so many stories. She would never give up. This is a woman, passionate fighter through and through. Maybe even too much, maybe even a little too tough in terms of some interactions with her family. She was extremely strong, wouldn't take anything from anyone, always tried to stand up on the side of good and for what was right. So, it's a tough situation.
And it sounds like you really covered her mental state, but I don't think it takes a criminal psychologist to analyze him.
Yeah.
And derive that this guy has a history of violence. This guy is unstable. This guy could have done these things. We have so much history, a pattern of behavior to back this up.
Right.
Like that doesn't add to a prosecutor or investigators,
but that's really where it gets tough. I mean, I think all of us that are in this kind of true crime field specialize in different things or kind of look for different things in the cases. My thing is physical evidence. I'm always looking for what's the physical piece that takes that needle and it pushes it from this side of the story over to that side of the story. And in this case, you have the scene that is manipulated right from the start. So whatever physical pieces you're trying to rely on, it's like it's a moving puzzle. It's like doing a jigsaw puzzle in a pool or something. I mean, it's constantly moving on you. So it's very, very tough. But you're right on the character end, looking at the personalities that we're talking about here. Not very hard to think that he might have had something to do with this. The dude sat in prison for choking a former wife of his. While he was in there, was he thinking about different ways of doing this? so that he wouldn't get caught the next time or wouldn't be in trouble the next time. And then you have the whole aspect in terms of this woman she had a lot going on in her life. She had her own home. She had her own vehicles. He needed her for a ride. I mean, that's how they wound up meeting.
Yeah, I mean, you had him who had nothing going for him. He was a total loser. I mean, I hate to just be that personal, but he's a total loser. He's sponging off this woman and he wants to get married to her because that's his meal ticket.
Right. But at that point, is it he wants to get married to her because she's the meal ticket that's going to keep being there? Or is it, well, now I'm married to her. If she happened to die tonight, I get everything.
Yeah.
And that's effectively what happens in this case. So her mother, tries to collect whatever funds are left in her account for her children. I think 2 days after the occurrence, account's been emptied.
Gone. Yeah.
House is completely trashed. Someone paints on the wall "Till Death Do Us Party," like graffitis the interior of the wall. House is completely ransacked. I mean, like literally every cabinet tore open, shelves broken off the wall, stuff thrown around upside down, just a complete and total wreck. And the weird thing is, I spoke a little bit to the owner of the house and he's like, what did this guy do? Like, he could have just assumed her payments and he would have wound up owning this entire house. I mean, think of how much money this guy was close to. And, I don't think he wound up paying 1 month's rent after she passed away. He basically just partied it out until he couldn't live there anymore, crashed her car. Someone's asking, what year is this? This was in 2016. And then he kind of goes off on a run, and I think it's about 7 or 8 months later, he's in Oklahoma with another woman and her 2 children, and they roll up on a house, and there's a 23-year-old that lives in this house with his parents. The 23-year-old calls his mom and he's like, "Mom, did you tell this guy that, he can show up and it looks like he's moving in?" And the mother's like, "Who are you talking about?" "No, I didn't." And, call the police. What the heck is this? Well, the father of this household is a county sheriff, if I recall correctly. And the police are dispatched. They go to the house and they find that it's Brad and this new woman. They scatter at the time of the police pulling up. The woman is found behind the house, hiding in the bushes with her kids. The cops go looking for Brad, and he is at a bar. And apparently when they go into the bar, he hides behind like a karaoke speaker or something like that. And they arrest him.
He's on meth, right? He's on meth, right?
Okay.
Yeah,
he's on meth at that point.
Because normal people don't be acting that way. I mean,
right. Yeah. If you get me that close to a karaoke speaker, I'm singing. I'm not hiding behind it. So he gets arrested in Oklahoma. Eventually they kick him back to Minneapolis. And he does eventually get released, I believe, on all kinds of conditions. He's not supposed to. I think he's part of a treatment program and some other stuff that's going on around that. Honestly, I haven't heard anything lately in terms of stuff from him, which is kind of interesting because if you look at his record, it's a pretty regular tap of here's another charge, here's another charge, here's another charge. But
maybe he ran out of money and ran out of women to sponge off of. So.
Well, and that's the tough aspect. As we got to know more about him and people that were involved with him, it was just such a clear pattern. I mean, we talked to former employers. We talked to so many different women that had interactions with him, and it was always kind of the same story. He's completely in love with you, acts like he'd go to the end of the earth for you, and he's just kind of bleeding you the whole time. And then usually he has someone else on the side that he starts striking something up with because he's got to keep moving. He's got to keep that game moving. He's never really staying with one person in particular.
John, I've got a question for you.
Yeah.
So one of the terrible things that happens when someone kills their spouse is that they have control over their burial and, of course, all their possessions. Do you know anything about that related to this case? Did he take items that maybe her family wanted, or did he control the burial where they didn't have any say so?
Yeah, thankfully no control on the burial. Some strange conversation that happens kind of around it. Her daughter is going there trying to get, I think, some items for Elisa's burial, or at least for the services. And there's some strange kind of like him almost threatening the daughter, and he's weird because he goes very street with certain people. And like he's got these kind of thug friends of his, and he loves to throw these names around of these thug friends of his, and what they're going to do and how they're going to keep everyone quiet and all this. So thankfully, the family is able to have their services. He doesn't go, and there's a little bit of a story around that where some people are saying that he was told not to go. Other people are saying that he wasn't going to go anyway. It's really hard for me to understand what's the clear answer is there. But the family do have their services. Elisa actually wanted to be cremated. So she was cremated. And when we were doing Three Men, it's a point that Morph kept bringing up, because he was like, I just really wish that didn't happen, because potentially they could go and exhume her body and then kind of learn some more information about what could have happened there.
Like if there was multiple ligature marks on her neck, as if somebody was pulling multiple times, as opposed to one long one from
yes
a hanging.
Yeah. Now, in a really interesting turn, and I haven't had this happen on a case before, this case has caught the attention of a investigator in Oklahoma who is kind of now a family friend, and he's basically kind of taken it on himself to look into this. And whatever free time he has, he's like coming out here, he's conducting interviews, he's going kind of from the ground up in terms of reinvestigating all this. And he is looking through the photos. He does believe that he's seeing some marks on her neck in particular that show a very particular type of choke. And he's putting a list together for the medical examiner. His goal is to reapproach the medical examiner that he knows is already on the fence, show him this big list and say, okay, can't we nudge that over into homicide at this point? Yeah. And as of the last time I spoke to him, his list was like 35 items. And I've gone point by point on his list. He's got a lot of very, very good points about what's going on. Kind of in that vein that I'm talking about, you've got the physical evidence aspect. And yes, it is a moving puzzle, but he's really figuring out a couple of key pieces.
Is there hope here that down the road, maybe soon, that they will be able to make an arrest?
I'm in a spot where it's a tough case. I know it's a tough case because of the physical evidence is tough already. And if you don't have people that are really interested in terms of digging into it beyond kind of a surface level, let it slap my desk and I'm going to process it and move it on. It's tough to really see what can be done with that. On the character side and the kind of circumstantial side, tons of great information to look at. And if you can get one little piece that lights the fire of, yes, this is a homicide, I think all of that, Brad's history, his character makeup, all of that is just going to tilt this very hard and very fast. I've never seen a case before where you have an investigator working out of another state, and he's so dedicated to this, he's trying to actually move here to Minnesota to get this thing wrapped up. There's a lawyer that is part of that equation also. So we've got just a lot of tools and this kind of constant motion that's happening with it. Even Minneapolis PD, the family met with them and a representative kind of from the state. It's almost like, they filed a kind of a victim complaint with the state. The state issued a representative, said, hey, let's go meet with the MPD and see what we can do about this. And they have agreed to conduct some more interviews. They've agreed to conduct further testing on the scarf. The scarf is a tough thing for me because I don't know that the scarf really solves this. I mean, even if you find Sharon's DNA on it, it's like, well, she was living there. Or if you find Brad's DNA on it, it's like, well, he was living there too. So I don't know where you could find it or in what fashion that would really make it point towards, this guy is certainly the one that did this. But further interviews being conducted by MPD, investigator from out of state, lawyer from out of state. She's pulling records like crazy. I mean, there's still a ton of information that's just coming in on this. It's like a constant stream of information.
I mean, we see people get convicted off character assassination alone with very little evidence. I'm surprised that they didn't even pull him in for questioning, like an
Yeah,
interrogation.
and I think for the public, there's a legit concern there. I mean, we're talking about a guy that if we are correct, and this is another crime associated to him attacking a woman, this is a pattern, man. I mean, you can string it together with his other charges, and it's just, so if it is a pattern like that, where's it going to end? How many more people are we going to lose? And people, I mean, Elisa was like, another thing when we were doing Three Men, we were just being contacted by people constantly about how amazing she was, how caring she was. She had a friend that was kind of down on his luck that wasn't asking for help. She went and bought a bunch of food and like left it on his door so he wouldn't be embarrassed about it. Or, I mean, just it's one of those cases where it's like, we can't lose people like this. It always really grabs me when it's like, we've got good people that we're losing in these situations. And even when you consider, yeah, maybe her makeup was that she had to rescue the world. And ultimately that opened her up to a situation that was a really, really bad situation.
I think, though, unless we get a confession out of him or we get Sharon going against him,
Yeah,
I don't think the evidence, I don't, nothing's going to change with the evidence because,
yeah,
everything is already been seen, already been examined.
that was another interesting aspect of going through the text messages, message by message. And it seemed like that game I was telling you about where he has one woman and he kind of starts working on another one so he can jump.
Mm-hmm.
It seemed like there was some work towards Sharon romantically. There was some messages going back and forth between them where it was kind of like, okay, this might be leading somewhere between the two of them. I don't know if it got there. I don't think it did. It was kind of one of those drunken, drugged out nights. Hey, meet me at a hotel. We're going to have a hot tub. We're going to have a good time type conversation. I'm still hoping that something clicks within Sharon. She got in touch several times while we were releasing the episodes. We could just never really close the deal on getting her to answer a straight question or getting her to agree to some type of interview. She agreed to it, but then the next day when we're supposed to line up the time, she doesn't show up. Or even the investigator, came out, wanted to meet with her. I was recording with him on the day he was supposed to meet with her.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, hey, John, do you want to come along? You can watch this. And I was like, well, good luck, but I'm pretty sure it's not going to happen. And then I got a text from him, a couple hours later. Yeah, you're right. She didn't show. It looks like they've just added to the chat box the change.org petition for,
cool.
For the case.
Yeah, I really hope people, and I'll tweet this out later too, but I hope people sign it and share it because this case definitely needs some more attention. And I know you're saying that there are people both on the investigative side and otherwise who are trying to move this case forward. But man, when you can just add a bunch of signatures, it doesn't take a lot of time, but it shows people out there care.
Yeah, absolutely. And if nothing else, you're showing the family that there's more people out there that care as well.
We covered a case like this not too long ago. And the one thing that really stood out to me was when you have someone saying, oh, well, she must have done this to herself. And then you have a lot of people who knew that person really, really well.
Yeah.
You're basically saying, yeah, this is what that person's like, but it's to everyone that knew her, that's clearly a lie. It's almost like you're insulting the memory of that person because they wouldn't have done that. And then when you talk about the timeline of when there was this argument and then there's nothing explained about why that would have de-escalated. And then someone who's like a friend of a friend is cutting her down. I mean, it's very suspicious. And you'd think right there, it would cause something to happen. That's just in my mind.
Yeah. I don't know if I made it clear, but the phone that's found in the bushes over at the neighbor's house turns out to be Brad's phone. Her cell phone is left in the kitchen and there is a meal in the kitchen. It looks like she had warmed up something in the microwave, but only had like a bite and then left it. So there's a lot of other pieces to the information here where it's kind of like, what happened and how come no one knows? How come nobody has? And another point a lot of people get stuck on is, wait, this is their wedding night and he's going to sleep on the couch, and she's going down to the bedroom and no one's going to check on her. And I can tell you guys what the pattern that you see in terms of how they fight, you would know something was wrong if you didn't hear from her for like 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Because I can tell you, and I'd be very surprised if they didn't actually even continue their fight with their cell phones being in the same house.
Yeah.
So if he got 10 to 20 minutes of peace, that should have been an indicator already something's wrong, because these are two people that would go at each other and go at each other and go at each other. Their fights would literally go on for like 12 hours at a time.
Dan just asked, is Brad still living around the Twin Cities? And that would probably be no, because he leaves a pattern of burned bridges behind him. So he always has to be on the move to go find a new person to sponge off of.
Yeah. The last I heard, he actually was around the Twin Cities. He's got some family that's kind of not exactly in the Twin Cities area, but kind of close, kind of local. So yeah, believe it or not, he actually does still bounce around here.
Okay.
Yeah. Any other questions or comments that we want to get from the audience on this?
Definitely. If the audience has any questions, that would be great.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Judy, Elisa's mother is here. She's saying Burnsville.
Okay.
Yeah. Hey, Judy. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. And if I'm missing anything, or if there's any other points you want to get in there, just let us know.
Yeah, I'm just surprised myself that there was no investigation, essentially. I mean, they just kind of...
Yeah, it was really, that's part of what bothered me. Like when I listen to the interviews and I consider what the body cam footage is showing us when they show up, like why didn't the homicide investigators ask, hey, we noticed that the front gate was busted up, or we noticed that there was a lamp that was broken and thrown on the ground. And by the way, we looked into the reports and we see that there was a call and from last night, and you guys were having a fight in the neighbor's yard. Like none of those questions happened during the interview process. Yeah. Judy's also mentioning parents of murdered children. So she reached out to an organization, actually a really good organization. I don't know if you guys have heard of this, but it's called Parents of Murdered Children. And they're actually for family members of all kinds, if you've had a murder in your family. And they have a service called Second Opinion Services. And for a donation, I think of $100, if I remember correctly, you can send them your case information and they'll have an investigator kind of look over all the materials and just render another opinion about what's going on with the case. Judy did that, and they got an investigator, a guy that has a really good background, former military, worked for one of the police departments as well, also worked in a legal capacity for a while. He went over the case file and kicked a letter back to her, and his conclusion was the same thing. There's certainly something wrong here. It wasn't investigated properly. He thinks that it does warrant further investigation. So for Ryan M's question, what's the most frustrating case you've covered so far? It might be this one. And I've covered some tough things, but what frustrates me about this case is I've pulled in so many experts, and of course with the help of Mike Morford and Gray Hughes, we've pulled together so many good conversations about this. The needle keeps pointing in that direction, but we just can't take it across the finish line. And that's why I'm really hoping that this investigator that's working on this, the lawyer that's working on this, I'm hoping that we can get it to happen. If we can just get that determination changed to homicide, I think it's going to kick this thing into a whole different gear. And quite honestly, we've got the medical examiner kind of already halfway there. I think it's really just a little bit more of a nudge.
Well, and Brad doesn't sound like the smartest guy on the planet, and he's pretty reckless. If they even put a tiny bit of pressure on him, he might cave. I mean, just put the pressure on. You know?
There's an interesting moment. He was interviewed by a female detective, And there's an interesting moment in the interview where the male detective that works with her kind of, I think he leans into the room or he leans into the car to ask about something. And you can literally hear Brad's voice and demeanor completely change, like get really nervous and kind of like, you know, just, you can tell his comfort level completely shifts. And then as soon as the guy leaves, he just goes back to his comfort zone. This is someone that I feel like his currency is manipulating women. And it's where he works. So to your point, yeah, I think that, and keep in mind, these were interviews that were done. They weren't interrogations. And if it could have gone to that point, if it could have been a little bit of a stronger questioning, and especially about the black hole in the story, which is how does the fight de-escalate? Because if you look through their Twitter or their text exchanges, they don't de-escalate fights well at all. They drag on for hours and hours and hours, and they keep kind of sniping back and forth at each other. I think basically until they kind of have a romantic encounter and kind of smooth things out and get to the next day. So,
and I wanted to clarify real quick. It probably wasn't that the female investigator wasn't doing a good job. It's just his comfort level with manipulating women. He didn't feel threatened or intimidated, but he does.
That's pretty clear.
By men. Yeah.
That's pretty clear to me.
You were slamming on a female investigator or anything.
No. I think she did an okay job. Surprisingly, she was featured on 48 Hours. She has since retired. I don't think it had anything to do with this case. I think it was probably just time for her to retire, but I don't know for sure. And that's why I keep trying to draw that distinction of, I know this was not an interrogation situation. I know that she was just doing a questioning, but knowing, and it's weird because it's hindsight, right? I'm looking at it after having all these facts presented, the input of Judy, who is, before we got this investigator that's working on it now, Judy was really the number one investigator on this case, and I had her direct input. So looking back on it, I keep looking at that interview and saying, why aren't you asking this question? Why aren't you getting to how this thing de-escalates? Why aren't we getting to what were they really fighting about? I think his story, if I remember right, was he says they were arguing because Elisa mentioned wanting to have some kind of romantic thing with Sharon included, which on your wedding night, and I can tell you from what I know about Elisa, from absorbing so much information about her, she was like a romantic. I can't imagine her taking a relationship to that level where she's going to open it up like that. The other thing is, and you can see this in the police records, they get flooded with phone calls as the information about her death gets out. Friends they're just hammering the police department with, there's no way she did this, there's no way she did this, and they're logging all these friends in their report that they actually hand over to the DA. So
I have another question, John. So this really just bothers me, but when it comes down to it, why can't they just step it up to interrogation? I know you're saying, well, they don't have enough to do an arrest. Why can't they pull him in and put the pressure on him? It seems like there's a real opportunity here to try something else, which is, these detectives, once they move to interrogation, many of them are very, very good at it. Why don't they just try that? That's another step instead of waiting to figure out if they can put a certain puzzle together. They already have the timeline. They already have the people involved. They have probably a good 100 people that are willing to step up and talk in court if need be on Lisa's behalf. So why isn't that happening? Do you know the answer to that?
No, I don't have a straight answer for it, but I can tell you, after going through this case and opening it up to so many people and seeing the conversation that so many people are having about it, it might be a matter of odds of, is this file hitting the desk of someone that can look at this and see there's something deeper going on here? Or is it someone that's like, hey, she was hanging from the rafter, and that's clearly not an attack. She had no defensive wounds. So that wasn't,
the medical examiner, is the documentation from the medical examiner good enough? Is there any regret now that she's been cremated that they can't go back? I mean, do you feel like it's solid enough?
I honestly, the information that I've seen from the medical examiner is very solid. The photos are extremely solid. The points that you were trying to raise, Justin, about the type of damage that they could look at in her neck, they have very, very clear analysis of what's going on there. It's extremely graphic. I'm hoping that Angie and Judy haven't actually seen that for themselves. So I think they've got the information that they need from that standpoint. It's really, can we prove there's some manipulation that was going on with the body that either she couldn't have been hanging in that position, or after the fact she was somehow moved, or that the choke happened in some other way. Maybe the scarf was still used, but maybe, he's standing behind her. Something to that effect.
Can I, to Aaron's question, why
Mhm.
can't the police just bring him in for an interrogation? They can ask him to come in,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
it's up to him to agree to it. And if they're not asking, then he's not having to say no. And back to the interrogation, if you said that his demeanor changed when a male officer popped his head in, why don't you build on that?
Yeah.
I mean, that's the whole point of an interrogation. This is why I don't even care for polygraph tests, although I like them because it puts pressure on you and you
Right.
think that this is legit and you start to mess up. And I would have leveraged, oh, this male officer popped his head in and he looked like he was shaking. Hey, why don't you come in here and sit down and start questioning too? I mean, there's some missed opportunities there to kind of dig deeper, and they could do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And to your point, the best thing that could happen in this case in terms of moving it forward would certainly be an admission. If they could get him in that room and they could have the right conversation and could get him to open up about it.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, we've all seen those interrogations, correct, John? You've seen footage of I've watched interrogations of cases we haven't even covered and may never cover. But some of these detectives are very, very crafty. They can pick up on those little statements or even just shifting eyes. They know where to move. Do you know what I mean? They know when to press the buttons, and they can get people to talk.
Yeah, I don't think it would be very hard. Yeah, I don't think it would be very hard at all for them to put a little pressure on him and get him to talk. It didn't seem like he handled pressure very well in the relationship, just based on what I was seeing and the types of fights that they were having back and forth. And he's very motivated by a few particular things. I think if an investigator would just read through those text exchanges, I think they could use it like a roadmap for pressure points in terms of applying them and possibly getting him to talk. But it's tough because we also kicked around a lot of the possibility of what if we finally got Sharon to talk in all this. And there's a problem because you have her already being extremely flighty. Information that she has kicked in or that she's given to the family has varied wildly. You get kind of one story one day, another story the next. Yeah. So even if you had her come in and say, yeah, I'm willing to write it down, he did it, and here's how he did it.
She's not credible.
She's not credible. You put her on a stand and, the other side's just going to take her apart. So, and honestly, even to Brad's character, I mean, it'd be very hard to trust information that's coming from him as well, outside of a straight admission of guilt.
Yeah.
So that's what's tough about this. You've got just a very tight, confined case literally happening within those walls. There's some question of if there might have been other people around that night. We couldn't get very clear definition on whom else might have been around the house that night. We know there was a lot of people around the house after that. So I'd be very surprised if someone hasn't heard a story about what could have happened in there. We have heard some rumblings of people talking about the fact that he might have been using that as a potential threat to other people, that, hey, I've done it before, and if you're not careful, I can do it again, type of dialogue. It's really, really tough. It's definitely one of the toughest cases that I've ever looked into.
And since he has such a reckless lifestyle, I wonder, is he going to get himself into some trouble? Is he going to go to prison, or if maybe he just ODs one day and then we don't have any answers at that point because he's gone. and
Yeah.
no justice.
Yeah, absolutely. And
The
you know,
clock is ticking.
if you look at his history, yeah, I mean, it's just a matter of time until there's definitely another arrest. And if you look at the recklessness in terms of the lifestyle, who knows where that could lead. Yeah.
Well, John, so we knew of you back, I guess it would probably be 4 or 5 years ago because of Brain Scratch. And when I talked to you, you said you launched it in 2015. So you talked about your podcast, but what's going on with your YouTube channel?
Well, the most recent thing was how I got to spend some time with you guys again since the since the stay in place orders have kicked out. I decided to try to do something a little different and get us all to spend some time together and kind of show a different side of us. Something that I really appreciate about CrimeCon actually is getting to spend time with all these creators you see outside of the format of whatever their art is. So we did this project called True Crime Game Time. And it is a live show that happens on Saturday nights. We get true crime creators together, but we play games. We don't talk about crime. We kind of talk about our shows just a little bit, but then we dive into kind of a straight game show format. We play Jackbox party games. And while we're doing it, we're raising money for Feeding America. Last weekend, we had our biggest show yet. We had Paul Holes. We had Billy Jensen. So we had the Murder Squad. We had Kendall Ray, who is a very big YouTuber in this space. We had Danielle Hallen. And we had Kendall Ray's cousin that was there as well. We raised over $1,500 just on that one night for Feeding America. Yeah. So we got another one coming up this weekend as well. On Saturday night, it is Murderish, Mind Over Murder, and Trace Evidence that are playing this weekend. And then the weekend after that, we're kind of doing an all-star show where I'm bringing back several people that were on the game previously. And I think that's going to be the end of this run of game night. I'm kind of working on changing it up a little bit and doing some other type of game format, maybe once a month going forward. But, you know, we're starting to get the stay-at-home orders relaxed a little bit. I know here in Minnesota, we just heard from our governor today that they're finally going to open restaurants and bars on the 1st and allow people to at least be on the patio areas. So I think hopefully people will have something else to do on Saturday night instead of hang out with me on the channel, but we'll see.
We've had some podcasters in there too. We've had Charlie from Crime Lines, and we've had but she goes by War Baby from Murderous Minors, Killer Kids podcast. Who we know them pretty well. And it was funny because I was actually communicating with Stephen Pacheco of Trace Evidence when I told him, I'm going to be on this true crime game show with John Lordan. I said, "Are you going to do it?" And he goes, "Well, it's funny. He just messaged me about it." And so, I told him, I said, "Well, you ought to do it. You definitely should do it." He said, "Oh no, I think I am going to do it." So that's great to hear he'll be on there.
Yeah, no, I'm really happy you did it. And it's been really cool because, you know, when I started, of course, I was hitting all the people that I work with all the time. I was just kind of making it easy just to bring the guests on, but it kind of grew its own life a little bit. And as I was asking more and more people, they were connecting me with more and more people. And it's, of course, I love spending time with people I know, but when I'm spending time with people I don't know, it's almost just as fun. It's kind of that same connectivity that we were talking about at the start of this episode when we were talking about Shauna Ray, about really being part of a community and knowing that you're not just a person that's stuck in your basement, you know, with a camera on or something like that. There's other people out here, and we can all support each other and maybe do things and have a good time and raise money for charity. I mean, what's better than that? So
exactly.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. My first time on, actually, it might be, no, I had done some podcasts before that, but my first time on Crawl Space was with Justin at CrimeCon.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, and that was cool. It was just like a last minute, "Hey, John, you want to be on our show? Come on over." And yeah, here's Justin from Generation Y. And okay, go.
Kind of put us on the spot a little.
Yeah. But who knew? I mean, you know, that's that's been a relationship. I've known you guys for a couple of years. I've known Tim and Lance for a couple of years. They also helped book a bunch of talent for True Crime Game Time. So yeah, it's been a lot of fun.
Very cool. Very
Well, we'll
awesome.
probably be doing this again soon, like next week. We just don't have a guest announced yet, but it was great to chat with you, John. And I really hope, I saw that Judith posted again about how the Minneapolis police have dropped the ball. I mean, it's sad hearing that, because you just really want justice, and we just want to try,
Yeah.
put some effort in, do something about it. Because I think at the end of the day, even if you can't get that justice, as long as you've tried, you
Yeah.
gave it your best shot, that's something that the family can hold on to. But at this point, it just feels like they don't care about us. They don't care about Elisa.
It's such a tough thing because, this is their home, and we love the Twin Cities. We love this area. Elisa actually painted a mural that's at the US Bank Stadium where our Vikings play.
Yeah.
I mean, there is just so much that is so important to us about this area. And to feel like the people that are supposed to be there protecting you and making sure that life is just and fair aren't really acting on the behalf of your loved one like that. It's a really heartbreaking aspect to it. On the plus side, I have got to meet some amazing people in terms of Elisa's family. They inspire me so much in terms of this type of work. It's always the families that kind of keep my engine going when things get tough on the channel or get tough on the creative front. So I really appreciate them.
Well, I'll be sharing this this petition out on our Twitter, and hopefully we can get some more people retweeting it and signing it.
Yeah, appreciate you guys letting us talk about this case. Thank you so much for having me on.
All right.
Cool.
And if anybody needs to, I'm sure they know where you're at, but if anybody needs to find you, give out your YouTube channel and your Twitter, whatever you need.
Absolutely. My YouTube channel is called Lordan Arts. That's LORDANARTS. Or you can go to www.lordanarts.com, and I've got all kinds of information about all my different shows there. Yeah, it's kind of funny. In the middle of this, I just got a tweet from my sister who lives in California still, and she's like, "Oh my God, a video of yours just popped up on my Facebook feed, like a missing persons video that I just did." So yeah, tons of content there. If you're looking for true crime content, over 1,000 videos at this point, and I'm not stopping anytime soon.
No.
And Judy says thank you. And thank you, Judy. Thank you so much for trusting me to help your family with this.
And I just went and signed the petition myself. So
awesome.
there it is.
Awesome.
Well, thank you everyone for showing up, and look for us next week, I think, right, Justin?
Yep. Yeah.
Barring
You'll
anything
find
weird
someone.
happening. It's funny because actually right now I'm pretty ill.
It's not Corona.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, I was tested yesterday. I do not have Corona, thankfully. But
Excellent.
yeah, just headaches and sore throat, and yeah, just generally just not feeling good.
Do you guys want me to talk to Stephen Pacheco? I'm meeting up with him this weekend. I can see if I can toss him your way.
Oh, I talk to him about every week. We talk about movies and stuff, but yeah, I talk to, I don't know, there's some podcasters out there I just really enjoy hearing from, talking to, and there's so many of them, but you can only keep up with so many.
Yeah.
But, any last thoughts, Justin?
No, I think that this, like most cases, that you have to handle all of them with care from the very beginning. And sometimes we can't solve for X because something wasn't analyzed. The ball was dropped in the beginning, and it's just very frustrating.
Yeah, that's what happened. All right. Thanks a lot, John, Justin, and we'll see everyone next week.
Yep. Take care.